About a week or so ago, I put out a video called What is MGTOW, where I carefully went through the core beliefs of MGTOW and dismantled as many of them as I could in the time that I had. And today, I'm going to turn my sights to another part of the Manosphere, and that is the red pill. A lot of the content on this channel is not just about self-help, but also deconstructing some of the really bad ideas that seem to come out of self-help and certain self-improvement movements. I like to pull these apart as best I can to demonstrate how they make your life objectively worse. And to that end, of late, I have been exploring what is colloquially known as the Manosphere, things like MGTOW, the red pill, incels, MRAs, because the Manosphere is one of the main hubs of men's self-help. And even though it is an extremely low bar to clear, I actually have to say that I find the red pill to be the least objectionable of all of the various ideas under the Manosphere. And a lot of that is simply because there is a much greater focus on like actual self-improvement advice in the red pill YouTube channels and subreddits and forums and websites and so on and so forth. There's a much more concrete focus on improving your life as a man, something that you don't find as readily in other parts of the Manosphere. But what I believe is their ultimate downfall is the way that they talk about societal problems, which is to say that they either completely misrepresent or misunderstand what they perceive to be social problems. And we're going to get into kind of what that is and what those beliefs are as this video goes on. As always, I am aware that this could very well draw a lot of ire from the red pill community and other associated groups within the Manosphere, as my other videos have done. All I ask of you is, if you've made it this far already, is that you watch the video and actually address the points. I don't really need to be told that I am just some soy boy SJW feminist cuck boy. Like, I already know that. It should be pretty apparent from, you know, all of this. So don't be afraid to actually argue with some of my points. I know that some of you are going to convince yourself that there's no point, but come on. Everyone loves dunking on SJWs, right? So before we get into what the red pill is, it's important that we understand what the metaphor of the red pill is for those of you who have not watched The Matrix. Okay, so The Matrix is more or less a film centered around this one guy called Neo, who, unbeknownst to him, is trapped in a virtual world where he has no idea that he is trapped, along with pretty much every other human being on the planet. They're actually being kept in like machine battery farms to power the machines that have taken over the world. And the Matrix is basically the virtual environment in which the human minds live unbeknownst to them. Now, Neo has some doubts about his reality, and he eventually meets a man called Morpheus, who offers him a choice. Take the blue pill and you will more or less remain in complete blissful ignorance of the fact that the reality that you're living in, the false reality, the Matrix, is real, and you'll live a life of blissful ignorance. Or take the red pill and see how far the rabbit hole goes. Basically, remove the scales from your eyes and see the world for what it actually is. Of course, he takes the red pill, exits the Matrix, and joins a bunch of other people who have also escaped the Matrix to fight against the machines. The story ends and there are no further movies after that. No sequels were made. Don't look into it. So the red pill uses that similar metaphor, the idea that reality isn't what you perceive it to be, that someone has pulled the wool over your eyes about exactly the way that the world works. It means coming to an understanding of the truth of the world. And what is that truth? Taking the red pill wakes you up to the truth that everything you were ever taught in school, by your parents, in your religious life, by society, by movies, by your friends, by your peers, by authority figures, everything you've ever learned is false. It is a grand illusion. There is no patriarchal society or any kind of patriarchal social construct. The world was designed by women for women, and women are running everything for their own individual and also collective benefit. They say that the truth is that our society is gynocentric, which is to say it is centered around women. And because of this and the rise of feminism over the last century or so, they say that men are beginning to lose their identities. Now, this idea of a gynocracy and men losing their identities as a result of that is an idea that's pretty ubiquitous across all of the Manosphere, and it is actually something that I touch in my video on what is MGTOW, as well as in a bunch of other videos which you can find in the description down below, which you can check out if you would like to. Here is a quick clip from that video explaining why it is that the evidence does not support the idea that women are the hegemonic power in the world. Even if I only look at the UK where I live, I can find numerous bits of evidence to back this claim up. For example, women are still vastly underrepresented as leaders in businesses, about 8% of CEOs in FTSE 100 companies, less than 4% in FTSE 250 companies. They are 1/3 of MPs in Parliament, they are less than 22% in the cabinet, and they are 32% of all court judges. It really doesn't seem that women have all that much power, at least in terms of the UK's circle of power. Of course, the argument would then be that I, and indeed other people who don't believe in this, are blue-pilled and we are being blinded and controlled by the feminine imperative. The feminine imperative is the idea that all women manipulate men with access to sex to act in the interests of women and the proliferation of their goals and values, their own individual and collective supremacy over men. This is supposedly a biological imperative, and it actually brings up another one of the main foundations of the red pill, that being the idea of biological essentialism and also a heavy focus on evolutionary psychology. There is an underlying understanding throughout the red pill community and broader parts of the manosphere that women are illogical, emotional, and primarily driven to gather the most resources possible. Money, men, sometimes called beta orbiters, power, influence, anything that can support that feminine imperative. Now, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to things like biological essentialism and evolutionary psychology, and I would do a massive disservice to arguments for and against by trying to break them down in this video, because it is far more complicated than I can manage, and I really don't want this video to last like 30 minutes like my MGTOW one did. So stick around, subscribe, and I'll talk more about biological essentialism and evolutionary psychology and why they're pretty fallacious when it comes to backing up any kind of evidence of the red pill, MGTOW, so on and so forth. But to summarize a quick argument against biological essentialism and evolutionary psychology, innate drives do not define how we live our lives. In fact, biology and our human evolution are only a small part of what makes up our broad and complex psychology, even on an individual level, let alone on a collective level. Biological essentialism is an inherently flawed ideology that has been used to back up everything from segregation, racial discrimination, slavery, eugenics, and pretty much every bad thing that we have worked so hard to expunge in the world. Now, along with being a philosophy to live by, the red pill is also called a sexual strategy. It purports to teach men the game of overcoming or circumventing female supremacy. And you learn this in order to gain access to what you want from women, mostly sex, but sometimes relationships and the occasional trad wife. Along with the term game, it does also appropriate a bunch of other language from various other Manosphere groups, MRAs, PUAs, incels, so on and so forth. Terms such as alphas and betas, which are two categories which have been pretty widely debunked and aren't really used in the scientific community, at least not in a credible scientific community. Other terms such as hypergamy, sexual marketplace, sexual market value are other terms that are kind of thrown around and loosely used. And of course, there will be more on them in future videos on the channel. Game is all about understanding the best strategies for interacting with women to meet your own ends. It takes on a combination of pseudo-scientific explanations and some more general self-improvement advice to back up most of its claims. Much like pickup artists, they believe that there are certain strategies that you can implement in your life so that you can more easily overcome a woman's defenses and ultimately get her to submit to you. Now, some of the strategies are pretty harmless, which is why I said at the beginning that certain parts of the red pill at the very least are not objectionable. These are bits of advice such as, get fit, get a good job. These are pretty harmless bits and pieces of self-improvement advice. But some of the other ideas are just downright abhorrent, such as the idea of last-minute resistance, which is a bunch of strategies designed to emotionally manipulate a woman into consenting to have sex with you, which, if there are any adults in the room, you will no doubt know that manipulating someone into consenting to have sex with you is not consent. It essentially teaches men that no doesn't necessarily mean no. It simply means you haven't applied the right amount of emotional or psychological pressure to unlock that biological drive that wants it all to happen. It is a pressure tactic that, if described to most people, they would put it maybe 1 degree away from just straight up sexually assaulting someone. And I don't think I'm being hyperbolic in describing it that way. Of course, the people who teach these techniques don't see it that way, because it doesn't matter how many no's there are as long as there is at least one yes. And this is advice that is pretty toxic even on its face before you go into any kind of actual analysis of that kind of behavior. And of course, if there are any guys who want to defend that teaching or those ideas, then I would invite you to think about how you would feel about those techniques being used against perhaps someone in your life that you loved, a sister, a mother, a female friend. The general self-improvement advice, that's good. Strategies such as overcoming last-minute resistance, those are pretty bad, and they are very indicative of the ways that the red pill kind of portrays people, which is that they are not people. You are the only person that matters. The majority of other people are either women or betas, which basically reduces them down to objects. But these tactics are viewed as justified within the community because women are simultaneously viewed as an enemy to be conquered and also a prize to be won. And any grains of truth that you can find within the red pill, such as the ideas of hypergamy, which I've discussed on this channel before, as actual things that exist, like an actual imbalance in society, Any things like that are brought up are often so vastly misunderstood or misrepresented that it makes it almost impossible to actually tackle the real world issues. Every point is couched in this language of women being oppressive conquerors who both simultaneously are weak enough to be conquered but also strong enough to be completely controlling the entire world. And it should be noted that such a belief, as the enemy being both strong and weak, is one of the core tenets of something else that we pretty universally despise: fascism. Am I saying that every single person in the red pill community is a fascist? No. The red pill's eventual goal seems to be returning men to their traditional place of hegemonic power in the world, and by extension returning women to their position of subservience. This would obviously involve rolling back about 100 years worth of civil rights, which is simply never going to happen. Now, obviously there is a lot more that goes into the red pill than what I am capable of bringing up in this video. After all, I said I don't want this to be a super long, expansive look into the red pill. But let me finish with this. The one thing that the red pill seems to be getting completely right is their intuitive sense of men losing their traditional identities, and that there is something fundamentally different about society than the way it was described to them growing up in movies, in popular culture, and things that they would have been taught by teachers, religious figures, parents. At the moment, we as men are generally struggling to figure out exactly what does it mean to be a man, because society has massively changed over the last 100 years or so, even over the last half a century. Like, we knew what it was that we were supposed to do, but the world has changed, and a lot of people agree that it has changed for the better, but there's still this collective lack of what it now means to be a man in a world that has completely changed from the way that we were taught that the world was growing up. Things like technology, society, and culture have progressed. Men no longer have to be the stoic warriors of the world. We don't have to spend our entire lives slaving away under the boot of some corporation just for the chance of gaining a little bit more social status than the guy directly beneath us. We don't have to fight in BS wars that aren't our own, that don't benefit us. We don't have to die for that, although many of us still do. We don't have to suffer under the crushing weight of our own internal process, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. Something that is heavily contributing to the reason why men are the disproportionate amount of suicides in the world. We are at a place where we as men can decide what it means to be a man to us. We don't have to have somebody telling us what to do anymore or what it means to be a man. We don't have to have that overarching construct, but yet we are being told by groups like the Red Pill, MGTOW, the Manosphere in general, that we as men still need to fit into these cookie cutter shapes, that we need to fit into these boxes of what someone else has defined as what it means to be a man. Feminism and women are not to blame for the reasons why we are losing our sense of collective identity as men. What we need to look to is the systemic powers that are telling us that we have to be perfect cookie cutters, that all men have to be exactly the same. We have to do masculinity as is perfectly prescribed by some great intelligent other, or else society falls apart. But look around you. Men don't act in the way that they used to, and I'm sure that if you are truly within the red pill, then that is at least something upon which we can both agree. Men are not the same as they used to be. We are at a place where you as a man can act in whatever feels the most congruent to you, whether that is being a hyper masculinized bodybuilder or a sexy femboy. You can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't infringe upon the rights of others, as long as you aren't hurting anyone else. You can be whatever it is that you want to be as a man, whether that means picking up the weights or picking up the nail polish or doing both. The red pill is correct in saying that what we were taught as boys is an absolute falsehood. The values of traditional masculinity, quietude, stoicism, emotional suppression, strength at all costs are killing men in droves every single year. Why? Because we're fighting to preserve something that has long since died. So if you are a true believer in the red pill and you have somehow made it this far into this video, then I want you to ask yourself something. Does believing in the red pill actually make you feel more empowered, or does it just actually make you feel like you are better than some other group? Betas, women, feminists, SJWs, because there is a vast difference between empowerment and superiority. Empowerment is living life on your terms and pursuing what you want without anyone telling you what to do. It's living life in the way that is most congruent to what you actually want. What I talk about on this channel is a philosophy of empowerment for the individual. What the red pill preaches is superiority, but superiority is inherently a weak and fickle thing, and it can be collapsed at any moment. Which of these things would you prefer to tie your identity to? Would you prefer to feel empowered as you are for who you are, whether you are the traditionally masculine guy, you know, you want to work out and get really muscular and get a really high paying job, or if you don't want that and you just want to live an existence that many would not judge as hypermasculine. What I want is for men to feel empowered to live life on their own terms, to do what they want. The red pill wants you to fit into a perfect box. Thank you very much for watching this video. Once again, if you've made it this far, leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, dislike it if you didn't. Let me know what your thoughts and questions are in the comment section down below. If you want to see more stuff like this, where I talk about the problems in self-help and around self-improvement, then subscribe to the channel. I do also do self-help content as well, but slightly less frequently because this is what I want to focus on at the moment. But I'm going to be doing more self-help stuff over the course of the year, so subscribe if you want either of those things. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you in another video here on this channel very soon.